Hey guys, so in this video we'll be tackling the first part of the special section of the Dread Elf Army book. I decided to split it up into two because there's a total of 10 entries, and the previous video has already got to become like half an hour long with just about 5 entries, so I'm gonna split them up in two videos. But first of all, there has been a balance update to the Dread Elf book, so there's some changes that have gone on the book. I'll just quickly discuss these and yeah, my short condensed thoughts on these. So the devastating charge is only if you have infantry models. This really harms the Legion Legate on any type of mount. So people were quite enthusiastic to play him on a Manticore or on a unit of Chariot. Without this devastating charge, it's way less attractive. So the alternatives of fielding either a Dread Prince on a Raptor Chariot or a Beastmaster on a Manticore or yeah, that basically. They are way more interesting now, I think, than the Legion Legate because well, you don't get the bonus anymore. Then the repeater crossbow now always has shots too. This is quite a big change for both the auxiliaries and the Shadow Raiders. So the Shadow Raiders, they could reliably pull off being able to get 3 shots each every single turn at short range with 3 shots at short range. So that was probably the reason why this went down. This was indicated by the playtesting team once they set the amount of shots to 3 at short range. Yet apparently we were forced to try out this version of the repeater crossbow. It is, yeah, I think it is the better choice in terms of balancing. However, we'll get to a bit more on this later. Crippling Frost only applies in the first round of combat. I don't think the weapon will be used anymore. It makes sense, but it's a 95 point great weapon upgrade that only gives you +1 strength, so more of the same. So generally it's not worth it. It's only worth it in duels. People can evade duels. I don't think it's worth it. Ring of the Obsidian Thrones gave effectively -1 to hit if the enemy units contained a couple of magic items. It's logical that it was a bit strong for what it did. The Battle Oracle giving distracting instead of -1 to be hit is quite of a big thing because it doesn't interact with any other buffs anymore. So the -1 to be hit, you could combine it with the suppressive fire from the Legion auxiliaries. You could still combine it with distracting of the divination lore, and now it's just you can't combine it anymore with anything. So yeah, the only way to get -2 to hit against your unit would be to get fear and the suppressing volley. And yeah, this is quite a big change, but it doesn't really look like a big change, I think. Yeah, then the Silent Assassin, yeah, sure. Pegasus Limited, yeah. Manticore Limited, yeah. Corsairs take count towards raiders only if they get throwing weapons. This was basically a design choice that should just have been implemented already before, because it doesn't make sense that they counted towards raiders. Even with the throwing weapons, I don't know if I would count them towards raiders. Thunderpack getting a little boost, that's good, and the Cover of Mist doesn't work anymore with a Banner of Speed. That's a bit of a shame, but I can understand it. Even though I think if your opponent goes first and casts Witchcraft on you to lower your march rate, then this is a bit of a boost because, well, you set your march to 14 inch instead of giving +4. Balance changes, a lot of stuff is kind of expected. Temple Legate goes up a bit. The Gorgons go down a bit in Hextra models. Thunderback go down a bit, so slightly. And then we go basically to the juicy stuff, which is the Warlock Acolytes that have an increase of like 33%, and the Black Cloaks that the additional models also go up by 50% in points. Netting them both 40 points per model for a Resilience 3. Kind of like no armor save model. These are really tough sells now. So the Black Cloaks is really interesting because now 4 additional models cost as much as just getting a new unit of 5 models. So I don't think we'll ever see any unit bigger than 5 models now with this price hike. The price hike is a bit deserved for both of these entries because they were quite a bit stronger than what they paid for in the bigger units, and the starting cost. Yeah, the Black Cloaks they benefited also from the fact that they are one of the cheapest choices in the book, and they still perform quite well, so they will be taken under any circumstances. The thing that doesn't really come forward from here, also because it's not mentioned in the design changes, is that the repeater crossbow also went down in AP to AP 0. So the Legion Auxiliaries actually have been changed quite dramatically with this update. So they don't have an incentive anymore to go to short range. They have decreased in their shooting output at short range, but they have increased in long range. But they have strength 3 AP 0 now. So yeah, for me personally, I don't think it's worth it anymore to field them in large numbers, because, well, it's still a unit that has to be close to the combat. So the combat threats that it faces are quite dangerous, and well, more dangerous than something that a unit of crossbowmen in the back of your lines should be concerned about, like a couple of wolf riders or something. So they have to be a hybrid close combat unit, and in the end they're just elves with strength 3, AP 0, AP 0 on the shooting. They don't have anything to find off armor. Their big threat is going to be cavalry, or anything else that is just armored, and even monsters are also going to be a problem for them. So yeah, a unit of 15 of these, you want to run them at 15 now, because any bigger is not going to be worth it, because you're not going to get a big advantage of using a musician to reorganize your lines, then advancing up, and then peppering the enemy with a lot of shots. So for me, this is really a unit that lost in this update, especially also because the Battle Oracle rule now gives distracting instead of the -1 to hit, so it doesn't stack anymore with the suppressing volley. And the only thing that the suppressing volley does stack with is the fear that the enemy could potentially get. If you have distracting in your list through the Battle Oracle, then the value of the Legion Auxiliaries go down. If you take Scrying, then the value of your Legion Auxiliaries goes down. I think it's going to be really situational to find a good use for them. So irrespective of the stats of the repeater crossbow, whether it's this or whether it's, as long as it's going to stay at 18 inches, it's going to have to perform really, really well at short range for me to include those. Or just really well at the 18-inch range. Now let's go for the first entry in specials. So that's going to be the Shadow Riders. Shadow Riders, they used to be the Dark Raiders. They can also be taken in core, but now we're looking at the special option. So that would be a unit of 5 or less. They kind of cost the same now as the Black Cloaks with the recent update. And I think, yeah, with the crossbow going down in amount of shots at short range, there's a good balance between the Black Cloaks and the Shadow Riders, with the Shadow Riders being able to march 18 inches and also having Famed Flight and Vanguard, and the Black Cloaks having the repeater handbows instead of the repeater crossbows. So the repeater crossbow you would still have to buy for these models, so that would net you a unit of 200 points. And then they start to become quite expensive for just fast cavalry. So I think an army, I used to play an army in 8th edition, 7th edition Warhammer, where you just had a full core of Dark Riders. I don't think it's that viable anymore to have 4 units of Dark Riders with crossbows. It's going to net you 800 points in your list, which is quite a bit. Yeah, I don't know. So The combat output has been increased a bit with the +1 to wound in the first round of combat, giving them effectively strength 5 on the charge, but only with APs 1 because of the light lens. So they are quite a decent choice to clean up small units in the backline, and in terms of just medium cavalry, they really shine. Yet they are still quite vulnerable. So I don't know if I'll take them a lot. I think it's really going to depend on the army. I like that it's possible to make a full cavalry army with Dread Elves, or at least a near full cavalry army. But in the special slot, you see a lot of armies, legendary army books now getting only faint flight light troops units in the special slots. I'm not used to it when I think that is mostly my issue. But I think in core you can get some other options, like 10 Corsairs now, that have a march of 10 inches only, that don't have light troops, but they come from your core points. They have 10 wounds instead of only 5. For kind of the same price. They do have the paired weapons. That does stack up quite nicely because they also have light troops. With the Mist Leviathan, you can also move 14 inches with those in the first turn. I think the Corsairs are going to be a strong competition for the non-repeater crossbow Shadow Riders. Then we go to the Warlock Acolytes. So this is one of the units that got downgraded a lot in terms of point cost. So this still indicates a point cost of 30 points per model, but that's now updated to 40 points per extra model. In the end, these guys are armor 5+ because of the light armor and armor 1, Aegis 5+, resilience 3 models. You're paying like 40 points per model for these, so they are quite expensive for the defense that you get. And offensively, they're really ace with the 2 attacks because of the Blades of Darak. Offensive 4 is nice to have on a unit that I wouldn't necessarily associate too much with good combat stats. Strength 4 with Ruthless Efficiency would mean effectively strength 5 in the first round of combat. So the strength is not going to be an issue for them. And then they have the Warding Amulet and the Blades of Darak. So for every spell you cast on them, their Aegis goes down by 1, up to Aegis 3+, and you also get the +1 strength from the Blades of Darak, with quite a good spell set to complement themselves. So that is one of the funniest things of this unit, I think. That out of your spells you can get Perception of Strength, which is really good on this unit. You can get Hand of Glory, which is also really good on this unit because it just straightly goes to a 3-up Aegis for them, because Hand of Glory gives you a 6-up Aegis and a +1 on your Aegis. Twisted Effigy protects them from shooting, and Curse of the Phantom Queen. Well, they're hereditary. I don't value the hereditary that strongly unless you play infantry heavy. So I don't really know if that is worth it, but yeah, it's a really tough cookie. It's a really strong unit, but in the end, it's a really fragile unit also. So you're paying 210 points once again for just a couple of resilience 3 wounds. If you compare that to I don't know, even some heavy infantry of the Empire, that's just 20 guys. If you charge into there, you're not going to win the grind. So this is really all about setting up your charges so that you can combo charge into a unit, which is allowed by the high movement of this unit and them having swift stride on the charge. Light troops really helps. The only thing you need is something to break ranks of the enemy, because the combat potential of these guys is going to be amazing. With 40 points per extra model, a unit of 12 would increase by 70 points, regarding to 30 points in model. That's going to be quite expensive to pay, because a full unit would now be, let's count quickly, 7 times. I believe 490 points. That's the level of just the dedicated combat unit, which they would be if you fully upgrade them with the bodies that you can find. But I don't think it's worth it. It's a really tricky situation, because if you invest your magic into them, they're going to be really good. Imagine just casting Perception of Strength on them, you already go to a 4-up Aegis. And if you get Word of Iron also on them, then you're looking at something with either a 3+ or a 4-up armor save, 3-up Aegis after that, so that is really tanky. And then with the Perception of Strength, you're going to go to, in the first round of combat, effectively 2 attacks at strength 6 for every model in the unit. Only being allowed to have 1 supporting attack, obviously, but yeah, if you compare these guys to the Fast Cavalry and the Vampire Covenant list, the hex rates, then probably these scale up way better. Also because they strike first with just incredible strength. But that's only if they're boosted by magic, and you cannot bring them back like you can with the hex rates, even though that's quite difficult. They are one of the top tier light troop units in the game, just because, well, they can strike very quickly with a high agility. They can do some damage with a effectively high strength, and they can get anywhere they want. So that is really good, but they are really a glass cannon. If your opponent has the first turn, for example, and he plays something like Empire and he has some Riders, you can Vanguard them, you can shoot at your Acolytes in the first turn of the game before you get a chance to put up your Aegis. Then they're not going to do a lot of anything in the entire game, basically, because they don't have Vanguard. A lot of people play these guys and assume that they have Vanguard. They don't have Vanguard. Okay, so let's go to the next one. So this is the major competition, basically, for the Warlock Acolytes. And in the previous iteration of the book, they were identified with the fact that they had Resilience 4. The new Raptor profile has decreased to Resilience 3, so they also just kept their Resilience 3. And that is a very interesting design choice. The other difference with the previous book, well, there's going to be 2 more differences. One more difference would be that the Dread Knight profile has been boosted up to 2 attacks per model, which is quite substantial. And the Plains Raptor has gotten Lethal Strike on the profile. Some people think this is kind of unnecessary. I would agree with them, I think, but then again, they are really fragile cavalry models with just Resilience 3, with just the 2-up armor save. That is really fragile, especially since they don't have any protection against alchemy in any way. Like Dragon Princes or the Knights of Rhyma, they still have their dragon armor, so they have a 2-up Aegis against flaming or something like that. And the Warrior Knights, they have still a 5-up Aegis against toxic attacks. There's a couple of ways in which units get around alchemy and stuff like that. But these guys, they're just one of the most expensive cavalry models in the game, I feel, and they don't have anything to fend off incoming damage. So they are also, just like the rest of the book, they are really a typical glass cannon. And I think the Dread Knights maybe even more so than some other choices, because they are more expensive per model than some of the competitors. So before the update, they were more expensive per model than the Warlock Acolytes. Now after the update, they are cheaper. I would say that right now they are winning out over the Warlock Acolytes, because with the Dread Elves, getting the charge is not that important anymore. You can give them lances, and I think that is for 3 points a model still quite a good upgrade. So the other option would also be to just not give them anything and just let them fend them off themselves with their hand weapons. However, the profile has been a bit more suited towards towards charging and then dealing with enemies in the first round of combat rather than going for a grind. So probably you would want to either have your lances. Great weapon is also an option. That is quite interesting because you're going to strike with 2 attacks at agility 6. You're going to strike at your offensive 5 without the lightning reflexes because that allows you to strike with your great weapon at your agility step. And you're going to strike at strength 6 in the first round of combat with +1 to wound with AP 3. So that is going to be really murderous. However, if your opponent either strikes before you, or if he manages to just survive your attacks, or if he just has a big unit and he doesn't really care about you striking down, I don't know, something like 6 guys or so, 7 guys, with your knights before he gets to strike, then you're a little bit in trouble because with a great weapon you can't use your shield in combat, so you're going to go up to a 3-up armor save with your resilience 3. So it's a really fluffy, cool choice, I think, to have great weapon knights in the book. And yeah, I can only imagine the type of models that people are going to use for this. It's going to look great on the table. But I think my personal choice is still going to be just the lances, and not necessarily to be able to charge with them, but just to dissuade my opponent from allowing me to charge with them, because then on the charge they're truly disastrous. Whilst if you go for a hand weapon, then the opponent kind of understands that you don't necessarily have to charge with those. Yeah, I think they're a really good pick in the army now, with the 2 attacks each. You can go for a unit of 5 models. 5 models seems a little bit on the small side. I mean, if you get 2 wounds on the unit, you're only down to 3 knights. And then, yeah, I think you're going to struggle then. So 7 models seems to be quite a decent size for those. You can get 2 casualties and still roam around quite nicely. 10 models also seems really interesting, but then again you are paying 175 points on top of the base cost, so you're paying close to 400 points again, but that's like 100 points less than you would pay for the Warlock Acolytes if you put a full unit of 12 of them down. So yeah, I think it's a really cool choice. You can have 4 units per army. 4 times 7 Dread Knights is cool. 4 times 10 Dread Knights is even cooler. I think it's a really cool unit, and I think it's also going to be possible to play with a full cavalry army with these guys. Then we go to the next choice, the Obsidian Guard. So the Obsidian Guard used to be what were they called? Well, they used to be the guys with the halberds. They could have been Obsidian Guard before, I don't remember, because I never played them. Just because of one rule, and that was Fearless. So I was never a big fan of fielding just big units of elves, especially with Red Elves, because there was not a lot of ranged protection. You kind of were forced to play the altar. And then you basically had a list that just rushed to the opponent, and that was it. And I didn't like them in an MSU army because, well, with Fearless you cannot flee at all. And they have been changed. Fearless has been removed. Bodyguard has also been removed, so that is a big downside to these guys now, compared to the previous edition. But they do come with a halberd still. They do come with ruthless efficiencies, so they effectively strike at strength 5 in the first round of combat. Their halberd bumps them up to AP 2 because they have AP 1 in their profile. Noteworthy is the fact that they have agility 6, so even against charging elves they will be striking at the same time, usually. And offensive and defensive 6, so that is also really good. They are really an elite unit in that respect. They do have academy training, so they do work together with your legionnaires and your repeater auxiliaries. So they are the academy training elite unit in the army, and they have the will of the Senate. And this is the one big rule that I would say enables them to be an auto-include into your MSU armies. because all friendly units, so not only infantry, not only dread elves, also your monsters and whatever, they must reroll their failed panic tests. Like with a general or a BSB, you can still choose not to reroll or not to use your inspiring presence. In this case, it is a must, so you must reroll your failed panic test. But it's really something that you want to be doing. And yeah, just for that reason, you can play without a BSB nowadays with this Obsidian Guard. Obsidian Guard and bigger units, I would rather play Judicators, I think. We're gonna get to the Judicators in the next entry. But I always look at the 2 attacks on the profile, and then in a big unit you're gonna lose this second attack. And that is really something that I always have issues with. You can get a standard bearer and put the Executioner's icon on the unit to get a really grindy unit, but then again, yeah, grindy units, I mean, you have a max of 25 models, you still resilience 3, you only have half your armor, 2 rounds of shooting off your enemy, and you're not going to be a grindy unit anymore, probably. Then we go to the next one, which is going to be the Judicators. So the Judicators, they used to be the Dread Judges. That was a name that a lot of people didn't really like. Now with Judicators, possibly is better. So the Judicators, they have 1 attack at strength 3 nowadays. They used to be strength 4, but they went down 1 strength. They have AP 2 on their profile. They used to be AP 1, strength 4, AP 1. So they got an AP instead. They still have their offensive 5, they still have their agility 5, defensive 5. Basically the stats are the same as in the previous edition, they just decreased 1 strength and they got 1 AP. They used to be Cult of Nab, so they lost their killer instinct, but they got hatred instead. Right now the cults have been removed from the army book, but they still got their hatred. And they have Artistry of Death instead of Killer, Ruthless Efficiency. So they have +1 to wound in every round of combat. And they have a great weapon to bump them up in the end to strength 5, AP 4 with +1 to wound. So effectively they're strength 6, AP 4. The only situation in which you're gonna have a bigger benefit from Artistry of Death than from strength 6 instead of 5 would be against the Sphinx, where you still wound them on a 5+. But then again, your Spear Elves will also just wound the Sphinx on a 5+. So I haven't done the math, but possibly a unit of, I think even the Temple Militants will strike the hardest against the Sphinx because they have battle focus and 2 attacks. And they fight an extra rank also. So probably that is the unit to take down Sphinxes in the new Dread Elf book. Anyway. Yeah, so Judicators, they are quite similar to the previous edition, but they don't have Lethal Strike anymore, and they don't have multiple wounds 2 against characters. The point cost is kind of the same. I believe the extra models in the previous book costed 23 points, if I'm right. They were rarely seen on the table, except for maybe 1 unit in the army, so it is quite understandable that they went down a little bit in points. Yeah, also at the expense of the multiple wounds 2 against characters and lots of Lethal Strike. So the loss of Lethal Strike is kind of a big deal for them, because they really want to be able to kill everything that they encounter in combat, and it's really a glass cannon choice. Because if they get shot down, well, they don't really have a lot of protection against this. But in combat, these guys are really badasses. You want to play them in Horde, probably in a big unit, because with then 24, 25 attacks with the champion, you're going to be hitting likely on 3+, you're going to be re-rolling the 2 hit rolls. You're likely going to go first with agility 5. If the opponent has a character that mows down a couple of your Judicators, well, then that is a bit of a shame, but that is why you can get to 30 models. So with the 25, you can get like 12 hits, and then when you reroll another 6 hits, so that's like 18 hits 2+ wound on basically anything in the game is gonna be a lot of wounds. With AP4. And AP4 goes through everything. Except for a regeneration or an Aegis. So you can put a Flaming Standard on these guys. I think that is a really interesting choice. Otherwise, you can make them Academy trained to work with the rest of your Academy trained units in the army. And that's going to be mostly to get a +1 on your advance. I think for this unit to be performing well on the battlefield, you'd rather just invest in a Flaming Banner to insert in the fact that they can take down the targets that you want to go after in nearly every matchup, rather than to give them 1 extra advance on their charges. I mean, if it goes right with this unit, then it goes right anyway, then you're going to win in combat by 10. If it goes wrong with these units, you're going to go down anyway. I mean, if you get a big unit of the enemy in the flank of your horde of Judicators, then you already know that it's not going to go well, because you only have 3 attacks. And the next round of combat, you're not going to have your hatred anymore. But probably in the first round of combat, the enemy already breaks you from the flank. So in that case, an Academy Banner is not going to help you too much, unless you count on the reduction of your opponent's ranks and increasing your steadfast. So that would still be an interesting part of the Academy trained rules. But then again, you can also just play a little bit better and mitigate that from happening in your games. And then the movement issue, I think, in order to play Judicators the most effectively, you would play a couple of units of these guys, get a Mist Leviathan to increase their march in the first round of combat of the game, first turn of the game, and then use Flaming Banners to overcome their weakness against regeneration. Yeah, and I think it's one of the hardest hitting units in the game, but then again they compensate that with just having Resilience 3, just having heavy armor, and no defense otherwise. You might want to include maybe a character in there, or at least in your army with a Potion of Swiftness, and something to lock your opponent's pieces that can really do a lot of damage to your Judicators. Either being a Lord that can take down stuff at a higher agility that wants to go down on your Judicators really quickly, or the Dread Prince with the Great Weapon enchantment Crippling Frost to just lock enemies in a challenge. Alternatively, you can just play a couple of Legion Legates and just sacrifice them in the duels and kill off the enemy's units one by one with your Judicators. Yeah, so that's going to be it for this video. Next video we'll get the rest of the special section of the Dread Elf book. For now, thank you for listening, and I'll see you the next time.